Welcome back to the third day of testing for 2024. We saw an interesting and interrupted day, not following the normal schedule. We saw another drain cover related issue, which meant that we were running a single 8-hour, session, no morning and night session, and no lunch break. So let's get right into the running. In first place was again Ferrari, Carlos Sainz clocking a 1 minute 31.2 on the C3 tyre. He did a total of 71 laps during the session. Ferrari finished the morning session in pole position. Before the driver swap, Sainz was in the lead by 0.2 to Sergio Perez, who was also running the C3 tyre. Obviously we don't know setups and fuel loads, but Ferrari will no doubt be happy to hold the top spot again. Don't panic either, Red Bull fans. It's still looking like Max is comfortably the front runner heading into the first race of the season. Perez, however, might be right in the fight for second of the championship, and if there is a driver who can consistently challenge him, something that he was lucky to avoid with the Aston Martin's fall-off and McLaren's dead start to the season last year, that might see him struggle to finish in P2 again this year. Speaking of Sergio Perez, he was second for Red Bull, with a 1 minute 31.4 on the C3 tyre, and he did a total of 53 laps. This was a decent amount of laps for the Mexican driver, nothing too crazy with only 53, but he'll be happier with his total than he was yesterday. There is talk of both Red Bull drivers being happy with the radical direction the team have decided to go in this year, and Sergio Perez is better looking like he's able to manage the characteristics of the menacing RB20. With testing done for him now, he'll be happy to have been in the pointy end of the field for the majority of his running. In third, we had Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes posting a 1 minute 31.9 on the C5 tyre. He did a total of 49 laps. Hamilton will be happy with a P3 finish, and although there was a half a second gap between third and second, Mercedes have no doubt started to show some of their pace. Although on by far the softest compound of tyre, the Mercedes seems to look like a stable platform. It seems James Allison has worked his wonders in his first year back as technical director. Lewis was looking really comfortable in his last session before FP1 next weekend. It's another solid session in the books for a team that's looking like they're going to have a really strong car on race day this year. Lewis Hamilton might not have too bad of a time in his last Mercedes. It's certainly looking like it's going to be easier than his last two. Following Lewis Hamilton is Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin with a 1 minute 32.0 on the C3 tyre, and he did a total of 46 laps during the session. Aston Martin were extremely focused on their run plan throughout the third day of testing. Not concerned with glory runs or qualifying simulations through the morning session, Aston Martin do look like they've made some changes overnight that's made the balance of the car a little more unstable and harder to drive. They will be happy with fourth fastest, and after having acquired a test through the first 2 days, the Aston Martins finally look like they will again try and take the fight to the top teams. Following Stroll was Lando Norris in the McLaren, posting a 1 minute 32.1 on the C3 tyre. Lando Norris's running was cut very short with just 20 laps. This short run was due to a clutch issue they had during the session, which they were trying to fix for a significant amount of time. They were off track for so long that they decided to swap drivers for the afternoon-evening session, leaving Norris with just 20 laps today and 145 laps for the total of the test. Following Lando Norris was Alex Albon in the Williams, posting a 1 minute 32.5 on the C3 tyre and a total of 38 laps. James Vowles will be happy with the session. We did see some strange running from Albon, including 2 laps on a C3 tyre and then coming back into the pits without having done a push lap. However, aside from this little hiccup, Williams had a decent session. They would probably have liked to get some more running in, only 38 laps, which is less than half of the top total of the session, but without any significant problems, Williams can be happy. Albon stated that he and the team have made a big step, being able to cope in corners that they previously had not been able to. A solid test for Williams, and things were looking up heading into the Bahrain Grand Prix. Following Alex Albon was Kevin Magnussen in the Haas, posting a 1 minute 33 flat on the C3 tyre and a total of 80 laps, the highest of the session. Kevin Magnussen would have been more pleased with his performance in this session, spending most of his time a bit higher up in the order, P6 to P7. Something strange was going on in the garage though. Haas looked like they've been taking some notes from Lewis Hamilton to fix something wrong with their car, because they decided that it was hammer time. We saw Magnussen standing in the cockpit, fiddling around with the steering wheel area, and eventually he was handed an incredibly old-fashioned looking hammer, like cartoon-style old. This is perhaps the most accurate metaphor for Haas this season, making do with what they've got. And what they've got is not a lot. Gene Haas can't even shell out the money for a hammer that wasn't sourced from Gunther Steiner's old mechanic's toolbox. Shades of Jeremy Clarkson with this one as well. Nothing a hammer can't fix though, even if you're in the highest level of motorsport on Earth. Following Magnussen in the Haas was Ocon in the Alpine, posting a 1 minute 33 flat on the C3 tyre and a total of 55 laps throughout the session. The biggest thing to come out of Alpine through the entire test was the fact that they finally added more paint onto their car. After all the outrage post-launch about the carbon fiber, I'm very happy to see the Alpine livery look more like a livery. Although understated and hard to place through the season, Alpine look confident in their own testing performance, Ocon hopping on the radio to congratulate the team on a faultless testing. It was a smoother day for Alpine, no offs and adventures like we'd seen on previous sessions. They seem to have made progress on their setup, although they seem to be the hardest team to place heading into the 2024 season. Following Ocon was Valtteri Bottas in the stake car, with a 1 minute 33.5 on the C3 tyre, but only a total of 28 laps. After only completing 28 laps, Valtteri Bottas' Sauber was sat in the garage for a significant amount of time with the rear of the car off for the mechanics to go to work. Going through some teething issues with this car is not surprising, considering it's a complete overhaul of the concept they were running last year. Although disappointed to lose some runtime, the drivers are very happy with the correlation between the simulation and real-world performance. We'll see if the stake team are able to push themselves further up the grid and not just tread water heading into their transition into Audi. And last but not least was Daniel Ricciardo in the RB, posting a 1 minute 37.0 on the C1 tyre, 70 laps in total for the session. Ricciardo put a lot of work into the session, spending the majority of the session on a different run plan to the rest of the field. He ran the C1 compound and did a solid amount of laps. There is a buzz surrounding RB at the moment. Alex Albon on commentary yesterday saying they've made a big step in the right direction this year. Daniel Ricciardo looking particularly impressive throughout this week, putting in a lot of laps and some impressive times as well. The RB is looking like a solid platform with a huge amount of potential. Helmut Marko stating that Daniel's lap at the end of the session yesterday would have put him as second fastest if he wasn't impeded by Pierre Gasly. Will this team make the jump up on the grid, joining the fight behind Red Bull with Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes and Aston Martin? It's looking increasingly like that's going to be the case. Now, onto some general observations of the session. First up is the Haas problem. There has been a consistent theme with 3 days of testing at Haas. They've really put a lot of laps in. Unimpeded by unreliability, these guys have worked incredibly hard in gathering data, which is unsurprising considering that they are really investing into developing throughout the year. Pessimistic with their early performance, Haas is remaining bullish on their chances throughout the later parts of the season. And the amount of data both drivers have collected will go a long way in that pursuit. They lead the way in terms of lap total heading into the final session of testing, an impressive and clinical display from a team that I really want to see prove that they care enough to warrant their place on the F1 grid. RB on the rise. There is a consensus beginning to form in the paddock that outside the top teams of Aston, McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull, RB are going to be fastest this year, some even going as far as saying that they'll join that front pack throughout the year. With disdain growing from Zach Brown at McLaren about the issues of one organisation owning 2 teams, if RB rock up to the first race of the season as competitive as they look, these protests will no doubt get larger. With a solid test from Ricciardo, who is predicting top 5 finishes for the team this season, some trouble might be beginning to brew in the paddock. The track limit, or should I say the limit of the track, appeared again today. The Bahrain circuit really needs to fix their drain-related issues. With yet another day of testing impeded with drain cover-related problems, they will need to find a solution before running for the Grand Prix next weekend. We would hate to see a repeat of the Las Vegas Grand Prix, especially at the first race of the season. Well, that about does it for my recap of the day session of day 3 of testing. I'll be putting out a summary of all 3 days soon, so make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss that video. I'm excited to see where all these teams end up in the first qualifying session next week. Where do you think RB are going to end up? Do you think they'll be top 5, top 3, or do you think that they'll be fighting in the midfield? Of course, we'll find out all of this at Lights Out in Bahrain.
Sometimes you just got to lick the stamp and send it.